Welcome to Entry Point Faith. Join us each week to discover fresh meaning in the world and find faith your way. Now, here is Pastor Nancy Lafferty.
According to Ralph Waldo Emerson, he only is rich who owns the day. And no one owns the day who allows it to be invaded with worry and fret and anxiety. So is Emerson idealistic, or is it possible to not feel worry or fret or anxiety? Now, truth be told, we all worry or fret or feel anxious from time to time. We all have negative thoughts, we have fears, we have worries, especially since the pandemic. If only we could be more like Alfred E. Newman, the fictitious mascot of Mad Magazine, whose smiling face, parted red hair, gap-toothed smile, and freckles actually first appeared in an advertisement for painless dentistry. That was the origin of the phrase, "What, me worry?" But then editor of Mad Magazine, Harvey Kurtzman, saw this image and claimed this character for his magazine because he said that kid looked like he didn't have a care in the world. And he wanted that to be the image of Mad Magazine. I don't know if you read that. My brother and I religiously sat down and read, was our Bible growing up. So one day, a psychology professor walked around on a stage while teaching stress management principles to an auditorium filled with students. As she raised a glass of water, everyone expected that this would be the typical, is your glass half empty or half full question. Instead, with a smile on her face, the professor said, "How heavy is this glass of water I'm holding?" Students shouted out answers ranging from 8 ounces to a couple of pounds. And she replied, "Now, from my perspective, the absolute weight of this glass doesn't matter. It depends on how long I hold it. If I hold it for a minute or two, it's fairly light. If I hold it for an hour straight, the weight might make my arm ache a little. If I hold it for a day, my arm is going to cramp up and feel numb and paralyzed, forcing me to drop the glass to the floor. In each case, the weight of the glass doesn't change, but the longer I hold it, the heavier it feels to me." The class shook their heads in agreement, and she continued, "Your stresses, your worries in life are like this glass. Think about them for a little while and nothing happens. Think about them a bit longer and you begin to ache a little. Think about them all day long and you get completely numb and paralyzed, incapable of doing anything else until you drop them. So it's important for us, class," she said, "to let go of our stresses and worries, to put the glass down." So I ask you, how do we do that? How do we stop worrying? I think the first step is to realize that worrying is pointless. If we were to keep a record of all things that we worried about during a given period of time, we would discover in reviewing them that the great majority of our anticipated problems or troubles never come to pass. This means that most of the time we devote to worrying, even that constructive kind that prompts us to try to come up with a solution to what is troubling us, is wasted. Thus, we not only cause ourselves unnecessary mental anguish, but we also lose valuable minutes and hours that could have been spent doing something else, enjoying life. So, of course, to avoid this, it is often necessary to subject potential sources of worry to the coldly objective and analytical light of reason. Once, shortly before a major concert, before a standing room only audience, a member of Arturo Toscanini's orchestra approached the great Italian conductor with an expression of sheer terror on his face. "Maestro," the bassoon player fretted, "my instrument is not working properly. I cannot reach the note E flat. What will I do? We are going to start in a few moments." Toscanini looked at the man with utter amazement, and then he smiled and he placed his arm around his shoulders. "My friend, don't worry about it. The note E flat does not appear anywhere in your music that you will be playing this evening." So the next time we find ourselves in the middle of worrying about some matter, the first thing is to be wise enough to stop and ask ourselves, what are the odds that that problem is going to come to pass right now? We may be able to go on to something much more comfortable and constructive. Many of our worries are just like the inability to play E flat on the instrument. So sometimes it's actually helpful to create a daily worry period of time. We could set aside maybe 10 or 15 or 20 minutes each day to focus on worrying, to focus on all the things that are bothering us, and maybe even write them down. It sometimes helps us to write these things down, and then that way we've given it some weight. We've got a chance to step away from thinking about it all day long. A gentleman named J. Arthur Rank, who is from Britain, he is an executive, he decided to do all of his worrying on one day each week. He decided Wednesday was worry day. So when anything happened that gave him anxiety, he would write it down, and he would put it in his worry box, and he would forget about it until the next Wednesday. The interesting thing was that on the following Wednesday, when he opened up the worry box, he found that most of the things that had disturbed him the past 6 days were already settled. It would have been useless to have worried about them on those other days. So in order to break that bad habit of worrying, we need to challenge our thinking. During our worrying period, we could challenge our worries and our anxiety as though they were hypotheses that we are testing out. We should ask ourselves, where's the evidence? What is the evidence that this thing I'm focusing on is true? Or what is the evidence that it is not true? What is the probability that this worry is actually going to happen? And then we might also challenge ourselves with this question. What would I say to a friend who has this worry? Worrying about things over which we have no control and cannot change, worrying about bad things that could happen, those are exercises in futility. We need to embrace what is good and true in our lives and live each day to its fullest. A businessman tells this story. The carpenter that I hired to help me restore an old farmhouse had just finished a rough first day on the job. A flat tire made him lose an hour of work, his electric saw quit, and now his ancient pickup truck refused to start. So I drove him home. And while I drove him home, he sat in stony silence. But on arriving to his house, he perked up. He invited me to come in and meet his family. As we walked toward the front door, he paused briefly at a small tree, touching the tips of the branches with both hands, and closed his eyes for just a moment. And then he stepped away from the tree, opened the front door, and underwent an amazing transformation. His face broke into a huge smile. He hugged his 2 small children, gave his wife a kiss, and had a smile on his face the rest of the evening. Afterwards, he walked me back to his car, and we passed the tree, and I asked him what he was doing, what he had done when he touched the tree. "Oh, that's my worry tree," he said. "I know I can't help having troubling things that happen during the day, and I could spend time worrying about it, but my troubles and my worries don't belong in the house with my kids. So I hang those on the tree every night when I come home. And then in the morning, I pick them back up again. Funny thing is, when I come out in the morning to pick them up, there aren't nearly as many as I remember hanging up on the tree the night before. My friends, let's try to recognize the waste of time and the destruction caused by worry. The Bible cautions us with these words. So don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today. There's a Swedish proverb that I love that goes like this. Worry often gives a small thing a big shadow. I don't know about you, but I don't want worry to have that much room in my life. And I'm willing to bet you don't either. So let's put the glass down. Let's try to stop worrying. Amen.
Thanks for listening in on this week's discussion on Entry Point Faith. You can join the Entry Point Faith community in person every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. at Conner Prairie in Fishers, Indiana. For more information and a transcript of Nancy's messages, visit entrypointonline.org. Entry Point Faith is brought to you in partnership with mypodcast.media.